So the first thing I want to discuss before I get into the actual subject of the video is the fact that I'm starting out new habits for the new year, which I'm not the type of person to make New Year's resolutions, because honestly, I know I'll just... Okay, well, I had to start over because I couldn't center myself, which I still don't think I'm centered, but anyway. Anyways, I was saying that I saw something on Instagram. Like, I'm not an Instagram quoter like that, but this was a pretty, it was a pretty apropos quote, even though it's from Instagram. People can be wise sometimes. So it said, "It's true you can choose to change your life no matter the time or date. But if today marks the start of you getting over the past, dealing with your mental, emotional, or spiritual issues, improving your physical health, and getting your money up, so be it." Happy New Year's. I'm sorry. I just sound stupid saying that. Yeah, I just feel like that's a really appropriate quote. At my church, we're doing they're doing fasting. I'm doing fasting from secular music for the whole month of January. They're doing like actual food fasting, and we're also having prayer every night. So, oh, hold on, I can really see that it's not centered now. What the heck just happened? That's a little better. Okay. But anyway, yeah, our church is doing prayer and fasting, and they're doing prayer every night, but also I'm going to start doing prayer every morning, and also reading my Bible every morning. So I just was saying that I woke up on a really good note, feel really good about myself, feel really positive. With that being said, let's get into the video. During the time of segregation in the United States, Black people were viewed as inferior to whites, and they were considered unworthy of associating with the white population. Black children and white children were prohibited from attending the same schools. The segregation of schools had a harmful effect on children, and not simply because Black children were given a mediocre education in comparison to white children. This forcible separation of races also had a profoundly harmful psychological effect on the self-identity of Black children. These children often saw themselves as unworthy because of the color of their skin. In 1943, Mamie Phipps Clark became the first Black woman to receive a doctorate of psychology degree from Columbia University in New York City. Mamie's graduate thesis became the basis for the social experiments she would conduct not long after with her husband, Dr. Kenneth Clark. In the late 1940s, Mamie and Kenneth conducted tests with 253 Black children, ages ranging from 3 to 7 years old. Some were from segregated Southern schools, and some were from integrated Northern schools. The tests were meant to analyze the psychological effects of segregation on African American children. The dolls test's first questions were asked of children to establish the difference between 4 dolls. 2 were white and 2 were brown. Then the children were asked which doll they preferred to play with. Then they were asked which doll was nice and which was bad. The majority of children did not prefer the brown doll and attributed positive characteristics to the white doll. Not all, but the majority did. Dr. Kenneth Clark stated that the final question that was asked of the children he found yielded the most upsetting results. Children were asked to show the doll that was most like them. And it was disturbing because many of the children were emotionally upset at having to identify with the doll that they had rejected. After the Clark studies were published, the doll test became a significant contribution to the psychology world. But dolls weren't the only items used by the Clarks to test the children's racial perceptions. Even more interesting than the dolls for Dr. Kenneth Clark were the coloring tests. The Clarks had them color a leaf, an apple, and a mouse to determine their sense of color. Then they asked the children to color little boys and little girls what color they preferred. Then the children were asked to color themselves in a drawing. When coloring themselves, the children used colors that were unnatural to the human skin, like vermilion. In reference to the children's unusual color choice, Dr. Kenneth Clark stated, "That, to me, indicated a sense of disturbance about his own color." Mamie and Kenneth concluded, prejudice, discrimination, and segregation made Black children feel inferior and was harmful to their self-esteem. The results of our studies were indicative of the dehumanizing, cruel impact of racism in our allegedly democratic society. And these children were internalizing. They were seeing themselves in terms of the society's definition of their inferior status. "14 years after the Clarks conducted their tests, the NAACP used their data as a part of the Brown versus Board of Education case. This landmark case, which ruled against segregation in public schools in 1954, used the testimonials of Dr. Kenneth Clark and his studies. Photographer Gordon Parks became a pioneer in his day. Parks was recognizable for his photojournalism, particularly centered around African Americans and civil rights issues. He took these photos of the children during the doll tests. This photo, Untitled, Harlem, New York, 1947, was published in Ebony magazine. The boy in the photo is referred to as Peter. When analyzing this photo that Parks took, the boy is shot from an angle that seems like he is in a witness stand. The boy is also pointing toward the white doll, but looking more toward the black doll. Perhaps the boy is picking what he is expected to versus what he prefers. After the doll test, the Clarks continued to conduct social experiments with children all over the country, particularly in New York. The Clarks also created Harlem Youth Opportunities Unlimited in 1962, an organization that worked with education scholars in order to improve the quality of education and better equip school faculty. Mamie and Kenneth's contribution to psychology and the fight for desegregation is an integral part of American history, and their names need not be forgotten. When we think of the face of the doll test, we have Dr. Kenneth Clark. But my issue with that is the fact that it was actually his wife's master's thesis on racial identification of Negro study students that inspired these experiments. And yet Dr. Clark became the face, particularly because he was a man, but also that had a lot to do with the fact that they reached out to him during the Brown versus Board of Education, and he's the one that testified for his doll test. And I learned that Mamie, his wife, actually did struggle for a while to find reputable work, even though she was more than qualified for many positions. But because she was a woman, it was a lot harder. And Dr. Kenneth Clark enjoyed a prosperous career, and Mamie's career wasn't as easy to come by. She struggled to find jobs. Dr. Clark actually brings up the fact that he was not the first one to think of the doll test. From a direct quote from him, he says, "The record should show that was Mamie's primary project that I crashed. I sort of piggybacked on it." Which I just think that's really, really sad that she doesn't get the credit that she deserves, because I certainly did not see, I saw a whole lot more information about Dr. Kenneth Clark. there is still the stigma over Black features that they're ugly, that they are less than, that they're inferior. And I can say from personal experience that I definitely have experienced some shame over being Black when I was growing up and as a child. It really took me a long time to understand that I can't define my beauty by other people's standards. And that's what's so sad about the doll test, is the fact that these children especially in the 1940s are not told by anyone except their parents. Hopefully their parents told them that they are beautiful and that they should not be ashamed of their skin color or who they are or their heritage particularly. And these children, they had some aversion to dolls that looked like them. And there's nothing wrong with playing with a doll that does not look like you, but when you don't want a doll that looks like you because it looks like you, because you think there's something wrong with the way you look, that's an issue. And that's what's so important to me about the doll test. That's why I'm so passionate about this subject. That's why I chose this subject, because it's really still happening. There's really still a whole lot of stigma over one's skin color, one's hair, one's features. And it's not just for Black people, of course, we know this. It's for all races. And I just want people to understand that they have to accept themselves for who they are. No matter what they look like, they have to love who they are. Love yourself, just like BTS said. You guys see? Look at this. Look at this bowl trying to match me. Like, you can't be me. Like, ugh. So annoying. Anyways.